Alien werewolf woman I found half frozen in the wilderness followed me back to camp. Slade had trusted only himself, his skills, and the wild's rhythms. Walls around his heart were thick as snow drifts, but looking into Rook's wild, desperate amber eyes, something fractured. He reached out, not as an expert, but as a man offering warmth, unknowingly inviting an interstellar loyalty that would redefine his entire existence, shattering his solitude forever. Slade's fingers, numb despite his heavy gloves, closed around Rook's wrist. Her skin beneath the matted white fur felt like frozen marble. He pulled carefully, aware of the delicate balance between urgency and inflicting further injury. The blizzard screamed around them, a white wall of ice and wind. He had to get her to his shelter fast. Her body was heavier than it appeared, dense and cold. He slid an arm under her shoulders, grunting with effort, dragging her through the deepening snowdrifts. Each step was a battle against the elements, his breath fogging instantly in the frigid air. He reached the lean-to, a makeshift haven tucked against a massive pine, its boughs thick with snow. He kicked snow away from the entry flap, then hauled Rook inside. The interior was cramped but shielded from the direct onslaught. A small, carefully constructed fire pit was already prepared. He unzipped his pack, pulling out a handful of kindling and a fire starter. Sparks flew, catching the dry tinder. A small flame flickered, growing with each careful addition of fuel. The meager warmth began to push back the encroaching cold. He turned to Rook. She lay still, half transformed, her features a disturbing blend of human and something wild. Her face was mostly human but framed by pointed, fur-tipped ears. Her hands were still paws, tipped with blunted claws, her legs a mix of human limbs and thick, muscled fur. Frostbite had darkened patches of her white fur, especially on her exposed face and paws. Her breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. Her amber eyes, however, were open, tracking his movements with an unnerving clarity. Not the vacant stare of an animal, but the focused gaze of a sentient being. Slade knelt beside her, his breath slow and even. "All right," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. "Let's get you warm." He pulled out his emergency blanket, a shimmering thermal sheet, and draped it over her, tucking it tight. Next, he unzipped his medical kit. He cleaned the frostbitten areas gently with antiseptic wipes, knotting the strange, almost iridescent sheen beneath the fur in places where the skin was exposed. He applied a thick, protective salve. Rook flinched once, a low growl rumbling in her chest, but her eyes never left his. They held a raw desperation, a plea for help he understood without words. "You're safe here," Slade said, his voice calm, reassuring. He kept his movements slow, deliberate, projecting an absence of threat. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a spark of intelligence that went beyond instinct. He then unwrapped a high-calorie protein bar, breaking off a small piece. He held it out. Rook sniffed it, her nostrils flaring. Her gaze shifted from the bar to his eyes, then back. After a moment, she took the offered food, her paw-like hands surprisingly gentle as she lifted it to her mouth. She ate slowly, deliberately, her eyes still locked on his. The fire grew stronger, casting dancing shadows. The shelter's internal temperature climbed, slow degrees at a time. Rook's shallow breathing eased. He watched as the frostbite patches seemed to recede, a faint glow emanating from beneath her fur in those areas. Then a more profound change began. The thick white fur on her legs and arms visibly thinned, receding into her skin. Her face softened, the pointed ears subtly reshaping, becoming more human. The blunted claws retracted into perfectly formed human fingers and toes. Her form became distinctly more womanly, though still clad in the tattered remnants of strange, form-fitting fabric beneath her fur. Slade watched, his mind processing the impossible. His worldview, so meticulously built on the predictable laws of nature, now splintered. This was no ordinary creature. She was something else entirely. Yet as her transformation progressed, her eyes remained fixed on his, conveying not fear but a profound, silent gratitude. Her lips parted, a soft, raspy sound escaping. It wasn't a word but an attempt. "Don't push it," Slade advised gently. He offered her a canteen of water. She took it, her human hand now surprisingly steady, and drank deeply. The silent communication between them deepened, a fragile thread woven from shared vulnerability and unexpected compassion. He saw a deep weariness in her, but also a quiet strength. The connection was primal, immediate. He moved to the entrance flap, checking the blizzard. It still raged. He secured the flap, banking the fire with more wood. The shelter became a small island of warmth and quiet in a hostile universe. He sat opposite her, knees drawn up, watching her. Rook settled back, her breathing even, her eyes still on him. She was no longer just a half-frozen enigma, but a presence, a life that had intruded on his solitude. And in her gaze, he saw not just dependence, but an unspoken promise, a nascent loyalty that resonated deep within him, challenging the very foundations of his solitary existence. The wild outside was brutal, but the warmth inside, the fragile spark of connection, felt like a new kind of frontier. Rook's breathing deepened, a peaceful rhythm in the quiet shelter. Slade watched her, the strange, ethereal glow beneath her skin fading completely. Her transformation was absolute. She was a woman, her features refined, delicate, yet etched with a resilience that spoke of something ancient and unyielding. The tattered fabric she wore was a dark, flexible material, clearly not from Earth. He noted the intricate, almost circuit-like patterns woven into its texture. As dawn approached, painting the blizzard outside in soft gray light, Rook stirred. Her amber eyes, now softer, less wild, met his. A flicker of something passed between them, a shared recognition of the impossible. She pushed herself up, her movements surprisingly fluid, her earlier frostbite seemingly vanished. She moved with a silent grace, observing the lean-to, touching the rough-hewn logs, the packed snow. She paused at the fire, extending a hand to its warmth, a faint smile touching her lips. Slade offered her another canteen of water, along with a portion of dried meat and berries. She accepted, her gaze still holding a profound gratitude. She ate slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving his for long. Her recovery was miraculous. Within hours, she moved like a seasoned predator, alert, watchful. "You're strong," Slade said, his voice a low rumble. He pointed to himself. "Slade." Rook tilted her head, observing his mouth, then mirrored the motion. "Slade," she repeated, the sound a soft, unfamiliar cadence. She then placed a hand over her heart. "Rook." "Rook," he confirmed, a genuine smile touching his lips. It was a start. He gestured to the vast, snow-covered forest outside. "Where are you from, Rook?" He knew the answer would not come easily. She looked out, then back at him, her brow furrowed. She made a sweeping gesture upwards, pointing to the sky, then mimed a journey a long distance. She drew a crude symbol in the packed snow near the fire, a circle with intricate lines within it. She then tapped the symbol. "Veridia." The word was soft, a whispered secret. Slade studied the symbol, then looked at her. "Veridia," he repeated, testing the foreign sound. It resonated with the impossible reality he was now facing. Rook nodded, her eyes darkening. She made a motion of pushing something away, then looked around the shelter with a quick, nervous glance. She held up her hands, one palm open, the other making a fleeing motion. Fleeing. Her voice was a strained whisper, the effort of forming the word visible. She was running from something. He understood. Her past was not just distant but dangerous. His gaze hardened. He would protect her here. Later that day, as the blizzard finally eased into a steady snowfall, Rook became a sentinel. She moved to the entrance flap, her ears twitching, her head cocked. Her senses were preternatural. She could hear the subtle shift of snow from a distant branch, the faint scuttle of a mouse beneath the drifts, sounds Slade would never perceive. She would stand for long stretches, utterly still, facing outwards, her body tense. Slade watched her. She moved with an innate understanding of the wild, her steps silent, leaving almost no trace. She wasn't just observing, she was guarding. His camp, his small sanctuary, was now hers to protect. He saw the fierce loyalty in her posture, in the way her gaze swept the perimeter, a silent promise. One evening, as twilight deepened the forest shadows, Rook tensed. Her head snapped towards the south. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound that was surprisingly deep for a human woman. She turned to Slade, her amber eyes wide, urgent. She pointed, then made a tearing motion with her hands, a fierce, primal warning. Slade grabbed his axe. He had heard nothing, but Rook's instinct was absolute. He trusted her. He moved to the entrance, slowly pushing aside the flap, peering into the gloom. The snow had stopped, leaving a fresh, undisturbed blanket. Nothing. But Rook was beside him, her body coiled, ready. She grabbed his arm, pulling him back inside, then pointed to a specific spot outside the lean-to, about 20 yards away. She held up 2 fingers, then made a motion of large claws. Bear, Slade mouthed, a territorial grizzly. They were rare this high up, but not unheard of. It would be hungry, roused from its den by the easing storm. A heavy snort echoed through the quiet forest, closer than Slade expected. A dark, hulking shadow moved among the pines, its massive head low to the ground, sniffing the air. It was a large male, its fur matted and thick. It was heading directly for their camp, drawn by the scent of fire and dried meat. Slade gripped his axe tighter. He knew how to handle bears. He had faced them alone before, but this time he wasn't alone. Rook stood beside him, a silent, unwavering ally. She pulled a bone knife from a sheath hidden within her strange clothing, its blade glinting wickedly in the low light. Her stance was low, predatory. The bear emerged from the tree line, its immense frame filling the small clearing. It paused, its small eyes fixing on the lean-to, then on them. A guttural growl vibrated through the air, a challenge. It lumbered forward, slow but deliberate, testing them. "Hey," Slade yelled, stepping out, making himself big. He swung his axe not to hit, but to intimidate. The bear merely snarled, picking up its pace. It was too hungry, too territorial. Rook didn't hesitate. With a burst of speed that startled Slade, she darted forward, not at the bear, but to its flank. Her movements were a blur. She moved like wind, like water, impossibly fast. She didn't engage directly, but danced around its periphery, a distracting, agile target. The bear roared, swiping a massive paw at her, its claws tearing through the air where she had been a moment before. Its attention was now divided. This was their strategy. Slade watched, his mind racing, adjusting. Rook wasn't just fast, she was intelligent, drawing the bear's focus, creating openings. Slade saw his chance. As the bear lunged clumsily at Rook, its flank exposed, he moved. He wasn't as fast, but he was powerful. He swung the axe with all his might, aiming for the bear's shoulder, a non-lethal but debilitating strike. The blade bit deep, a grunt of pain erupting from the animal. The bear bellowed, spinning around, its rage now focused on Slade. Rook was instantly there, a flash of white, leaping onto its back, her bone knife driving into its thick hide. She wasn't aiming for a kill, but for pressure points, for pain, for distraction. The bear thrashed wildly, trying to dislodge her. Slade saw the perfect coordination, the unspoken understanding between them. He feinted, drawing its attention, then Rook would strike. Their movements were a dangerous dance, 2 disparate beings, one from Earth, one from Viridia, fighting as a single, cohesive unit. The bear was wounded, disoriented, its overwhelming power countered by their combined speed and precision. Finally, with a frustrated roar, the bear turned and crashed back into the forest, disappearing into the deepening twilight. It would not return tonight. Slade leaned on his axe, breathing heavily. Rook, uninjured, stood beside him, her chest heaving. She looked at him, her amber eyes shining with a fierce pride, a deep, unwavering trust. He met her gaze, his own heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't felt in years, kinship. His skepticism was gone, replaced by an absolute, profound trust. He had found an ally, a partner. Slade's kinship with Rook solidified their camp's rhythms. Days passed with a shared purpose, a silent language forming between them. Each morning they moved together, Slade teaching Rook about Earth's flora and fauna, Rook instinctively understanding the nuances of the forest. Her senses, even in human form, remained sharp, guiding him to overlooked game trails and hidden springs. One crisp afternoon, while searching for medicinal herbs near a rarely visited northern slope, Slade felt a peculiar vibration through the packed snow. He knelt, brushing away a layer of frost. Beneath it, nestled in a shallow crater, lay a small, obsidian-like object. It was no ordinary rock. A faint internal light pulsed within its surface, a soft, rhythmic glow that felt alien to his touch. He picked it up. The alloy was cool, impossibly smooth, and resonated with a faint energy. Its weight was negligible. This was not from Earth. Rook, who had been scouting ahead, returned. She saw the object in Slade's hand. Her amber eyes widened, a flicker of profound recognition and deep sorrow passing across her face. Her hand instinctively reached for it, then hesitated, pulling back. "What is this, Rook?" Slade asked, his voice low. The pulsing light seemed to intensify slightly as she looked at it. Rook took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the shard. "It is a piece of my ship," she said, her voice a low murmur, the words clearer than before. "A signal beacon, broken." Slade watched her, waiting. He sensed the weight of untold stories behind her words. "I am a guardian," Rook continued, her eyes now meeting his, filled with a desperate resolve. "From Viridia, my people, we are sensitive to certain energies. They wanted to use us, to exploit our gifts." She paused, her jaw tightening. "I carried vital information, proof of their intentions." Slade's grip on the shard tightened. "They're hunting you." It wasn't a question. Rook nodded slowly. "They will have found this signal eventually. It is faint but persistent. It leads them here, to us." Her voice held a tremor of fear, a raw vulnerability Slade had not heard before. "They are relentless. They do not give up." The pulsing shard in Slade's hand suddenly felt like a ticking clock. His mind raced, calculating the new, impossible threat. An interstellar pursuit. His remote wilderness, his sanctuary, was no longer safe. Rook's safety, and by extension his own, depended on immediate action. He crushed the shard in his hand, the strange alloy disintegrating into dust that swiftly faded into nothingness. Rook watched, her expression unreadable. "We need to move," Slade stated, his decision firm. "Now my old refuge high on the mountain ridge, it's harder to find, more defensible." Rook's amber eyes held his. "We go." Her trust in him was absolute. It was a silent pact, a commitment made not just with words but with a shared glance that spoke volumes of their deepening bond. They broke camp swiftly, packing only essentials. The journey began at dawn, a silent, urgent trek deeper into the untamed peaks. Slade led the way, his axe held ready, his senses honed by decades in the wild. Rook moved like a ghost behind him, her every step precise, her gaze constantly sweeping their surroundings. She picked up subtle signs Slade would have missed. A disturbed patch of moss, a faint, unnatural scent carried on the wind, a distant, almost imperceptible tremor in the earth. "They use drones," Rook murmured one evening as they rested, her eyes scanning the darkening sky. "Silent, unseen, they scan for energy signatures, for Viridian tech, for me." Slade nodded, absorbing the information. He altered their route, opting for shadowed ravines and dense tree cover, using the natural terrain as their shield. His internal conflict was a battle between his ingrained skepticism and his undeniable, profound commitment to Rook. He was a man of logic, but Rook defied all logic. Yet his loyalty burned bright. He felt a fierce protectiveness he hadn't known he possessed. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about protecting her, protecting their fragile, impossible connection. One afternoon, Rook suddenly stopped, holding a hand up. Slade froze, his hand going to his knife. He heard nothing, but Rook's posture, rigid and alert, spoke volumes. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, pointing to a distant, almost invisible thread of vapor far above the highest peaks. "They are searching," she whispered. "High altitude, not close yet, but they are close enough." The sight of the faint vapor trail, barely visible against the vast blue, sent a chill down Slade's spine. This was real. This was a threat unlike any he had ever faced. Yet looking at Rook, her face set in fierce determination, he felt no fear, only resolve. Their connection was a powerful anchor in the face of the unknown. They pressed on, their pace relentless, fueled by the invisible urgency. The higher they climbed, the more rugged the terrain became, the air growing thin and sharp. Slade navigated treacherous rockfalls and hidden crevices, his knowledge of the mountains absolute. Rook followed without hesitation, her agility making light work of the climbs, often offering a steadying hand or a strong boost when Slade needed it. They moved as one, a seamless partnership forged in shared danger and unwavering trust. As twilight painted the distant peaks in hues of purple and gold, they reached the mountain ridge. A natural overhang provided shelter, overlooking a vast, uninhabited valley. It was a place of stark beauty and formidable defense. Slade turned to Rook, his breath misting in the cold air. "This is it," he said, a quiet certainty in his voice. "They won't find us here, not easily." Rook stood beside him, her gaze sweeping the horizon, her shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time in days. She looked at him, her amber eyes reflecting the setting sun, a deep, silent gratitude shining within them. Her hand found his, a warm, firm clasp. In that moment, surrounded by the wild majesty of Earth, Slade understood. Their alliance was not merely about survival. It was about a love that transcended worlds, a bond that would defy any threat. The cold air bit at Slade's cheeks, but a different warmth spread through him, anchoring him to the present moment. Rook's hand in his was a silent promise. They stood on the precipice of something vast and dangerous, yet here together, the threat felt less insurmountable. "We are safe for now," Slade said, his voice low, surveying the natural defenses of the ridge. The rock formations provided ample cover. The narrow paths leading up were easily defensible. Rook withdrew her hand, moving to the edge of their overhang. Her senses were always extended, always alert. She scanned the horizon, her amber eyes narrowed, movements fluid and silent as a predator. Slade watched her, a deep respect for her vigilance growing within him. He trusted her judgment implicitly, even over his own honed instincts. A shiver ran down Rook's spine, a subtle tremor Slade perceived instantly. She pressed a hand to her temple, a faint frown creasing her brow. "Something approaches," she murmured, her voice a low growl, barely audible above the wind's whisper. "Silent, high, not of this world." Slade followed her gaze. The sky, a canvas of deep twilight blues, held nothing obvious. Then a flicker. A distortion in the distant air, almost imperceptible. It solidified, becoming a sleek obsidian shape, silent as a shadow. It moved with unnatural speed, a predatory grace, cutting through the atmosphere without a sound. "A drone," Slade breathed, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. This was no Earth technology. It was Viridian hunting, tracking. It moved in wide, sweeping arcs, like a hawk searching for prey, its dark surface absorbing the last light of the day. Rook's muscles tensed, her posture shifting from alert to coiled readiness. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing a flash of canines. "They found us," she stated, her voice devoid of surprise, only grim resolve. The drone began a slow, methodical descent, its silent approach unnerving. It was not coming for a direct attack, not yet. It was scanning, confirming. Its movements were too precise, too calculating. "It's looking for a heat signature," Slade deduced, his mind racing. "Or something else. We need to draw it away." He took a step forward towards a more exposed part of the ridge. Rook grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No," she commanded, her eyes blazing. "Too exposed. It is scouting. It will not risk its position for one target." "But if it sees me, it might follow," Slade argued, trying to pull free. "It needs to believe I am alone. You can stay hidden." He knew the risk, but the thought of Rook being discovered, being hunted, was unbearable. "You are not alone," Rook countered, her voice firm. Her protectiveness was palpable, a force of nature. "We are together." She pushed him gently back into the shadow of the overhang. The drone continued its search, now closer, its optical sensors, tiny pinpricks of blue light sweeping across the ridge. Slade felt a prickle on his skin as the beam passed over their hiding spot, a cold, clinical probe. It was not just light. It was an energy signature, a scan. Suddenly, the drone changed trajectory, banking sharply. It had found something. Slade risked a glance, peering over the rock face. A small, discarded fire pit from a previous camp, long cold, lay 100 yards down the slope. The drone focused on it, hovering. "It's investigating old signs," Rook whispered, her eyes fixed on the machine. "It knows we are here, but not exactly where." Slade saw an opportunity. He scrambled from their cover, moving quickly towards a cluster of boulders further down the ridge, away from their main shelter. "Hey!" he yelled, a raw, defiant sound that echoed across the valley. "Over here." The drone reacted instantly. Its blue sensors locked onto Slade. A faint whine, almost inaudible, emanated from its sleek body. A narrow beam of focused energy lanced out, a shimmering blue line cutting through the air. Slade dived behind a large rock, the energy blast impacting the stone directly above him. A shower of sparks and pulverized rock exploded, stinging his cheek. A searing pain shot through his left arm. He clutched it, feeling a trickle of warmth. A glancing blow, nothing serious but a clear warning. Rook let out a guttural roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury that vibrated through the mountain air. Her form shimmered, a faint outline of white fur appearing at her temples, her eyes burning with an intense, primeval amber. She launched herself from their cover, moving with impossible speed towards Slade, a living missile of protective rage. "Rook, no," Slade yelled, pushing himself upright, his arm throbbing. "Stay back." She ignored him, her focus entirely on the drone. Its blue light flickered, recognizing her as a target. Another energy beam charged, but Rook was faster. She leaped onto the boulders, her agility breathtaking, scaling the rock face like a mountain cat. "They will send ground teams now," Rook snarled, her voice deep with anger, her gaze fixed on the drone. "They know," they confirmed. The drone, having located its targets, began to ascend, its mission complete. It emitted a single piercing signal, a high-frequency pulse that reverberated through the vast silence of the mountains. A beacon, a summons. Slade reached Rook as she watched the drone retreat, its signal echoing. He gripped her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice urgent, scanning her for injuries. Rook shook her head, her anger still simmering beneath the surface. "My concern is for you," she stated, her eyes softening as they met his. She touched his injured arm, her touch feather-light, examining the raw, red burn. "Foolish. You risked yourself." "I had to," Slade replied, his gaze unwavering. "They are after you, not me." "We are together," Rook reiterated, her words a solemn vow. She closed her eyes for a moment, a weariness settling onto her features. The transformation had taken its toll, the constant vigilance, the resurfacing memories of her past. She was not limitless. "They will be here soon, ground forces. They will be prepared." Slade looked at the distant horizon where the drone had vanished. The sun had almost fully set, leaving the peaks in sharp, dark relief. The signal had been clear. They were cornered. He felt the cold dread creep in, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce resolve. He looked at Rook, her face etched with exhaustion and grim determination. She was his partner, his reason. "Then we prepare too," Slade said, his voice firm, his grip on her hand tightening. "This mountain is my home. It has secrets they don't know. We will use them." He looked out at the darkening valley, a new plan beginning to form in his mind. The odds were dire, but their bond was stronger. Slade gripped Rook's hand, the cold dread melting into fierce resolve. "Then we prepare too," he stated, his voice firm. "This mountain is my home. It has secrets they don't know. We will use them." He looked out at the darkening valley, a new plan beginning to form in his mind. The odds were dire, but their bond was stronger. "What secrets?" Rook asked, her gaze intense, already turning towards the immediate task. Her exhaustion was still visible, but her warrior spirit ignited. "Paths they won't see, traps they won't expect," Slade explained, pulling her towards a hidden crevice. "We need to move fast. They'll use thermal and sonic scans. We need to disrupt their sensors before they pinpoint our main refuge." Rook nodded, her senses already reaching out. Their technology, it is advanced, but not infallible. They descended into a narrow, winding passage Slade knew intimately. His movements were swift, efficient. Rook, despite her earlier weariness, matched his pace with fluid grace, her enhanced night vision picking out details in the dim light. They worked in silent tandem, a rhythm born of shared danger and profound trust. Slade pointed to a series of loose rocks above a steep drop. "We'll set a tripwire here, a simple rock slide. It won't stop them, but it will slow them, make them cautious." Rook quickly assessed the structure. A diversion. Good. She used her unnatural strength to shift a heavy boulder into a precarious position, ensuring its instability. They moved deeper, setting several more small, localized disruptions. Slade knew the mountain's subtle currents, the places where wind funneled and created natural echoes, distorting sound. He found a spot overlooking a switchback trail, perfect for a false reading. "We can amplify an echo here, make them think we're further along or in a different direction." Rook placed a small, metallic device, no bigger than her thumb, from a hidden pouch on her belt. "My ship's comm unit, damaged, but its resonance emitter still functions. It will distort their sonic scans." She activated it, a faint, almost imperceptible hum filling the air. "It will draw their attention." As twilight deepened into full night, the first signs of the Viridian ground team appeared. Sleek, dark figures moved with unnerving silence through the lower passes. Their movements were precise, methodical. Slade watched them through his binoculars from a concealed overlook, his jaw tight. "They're spreading out, searching." Rook stood beside him, her gaze piercing the darkness. 3 squads, each with a scout drone. They use stealth field generators. "We hit the scouts first," Slade decided, his voice low. "Disrupt their eyes, then we focus on the main units." He gestured towards a narrow, ice-slicked gully. "My first trap. It's a dead end, but they won't know that until they're in it." The lead Viridian scout drone, a smaller, more agile version of the one from earlier, detached from its squad and began a high-speed sweep of the gully. Slade and Rook waited, hidden in a small alcove. The drone's sensors were humming, searching for life signs. "Now," Slade whispered. Rook lunged from their cover, a blur of motion. She didn't attack the drone directly. Instead, she slammed her fist into the icy wall of the gully, triggering a cascade of snow and ice. The drone, caught in the sudden, blinding mini-avalanche, spiraled out of control and crashed against the rocks below, its stealth field sputtering. A sharp, alien cry rang out from the Viridian ground team below. They had detected the drone's failure. "One down," Slade murmured, a grim satisfaction in his tone. He pulled Rook back deeper into the alcove. "They'll be sending a recovery team. That's our next target." Rook's amber eyes glowed in the darkness. Her partial transformation had faded, but her senses were heightened, her form tense, ready. "They underestimate us," she stated, a fierce pride in her voice. "They do not understand this place." Slade pressed a hand against her arm, a silent acknowledgement. "They don't understand us," he corrected softly. He took a deep breath, the cold mountain air sharp in his lungs. The plan was working, but this was only the beginning. He felt Rook's presence beside him, solid and unwavering. This fight was not just for survival, but for the future they were building, one desperate moment at a time. The mountain was their shield, their ally. And together, they were a force no alien hunters could easily overcome. He looked at her, his heart swelling with a warmth that defied the biting cold. They were ready for the next wave. A sharp, alien cry rang out from the Viridian ground team below. They had detected the drone's failure. "One down," Slade murmured, a grim satisfaction in his tone. He pulled Rook back deeper into the alcove. "They'll be sending a recovery team. That's our next target." Rook's amber eyes glowed in the darkness. Her partial transformation had faded, but her senses were heightened, her form tense, ready. "They underestimate us," she stated, a fierce pride in her voice. "They do not understand this place." Slade pressed a hand against her arm, a silent acknowledgement. "They don't understand us," he corrected softly. He took a deep breath, the cold mountain air sharp in his lungs. The plan was working, but this was only the beginning. He felt Rook's presence beside him, solid and unwavering. This fight was not just for survival, but for the future they were building, one desperate moment at a time. The mountain was their shield, their ally. And together, they were a force no alien hunters could easily overcome. He looked at her, his heart swelling with a warmth that defied the biting cold. They were ready for the next wave. The Viridian ground team below shifted, their formation tightening. 3 figures detached from the main group, ascending the gully with an unnerving speed. They moved with a practiced precision, their sleek suits blending seamlessly with the rock and ice. Rook's keen eyes tracked them, her head tilted slightly. "They're not just recovery," Rook whispered, her voice a low growl. "They are scouts, faster." Slade nodded. "They've learned. No more lone drones." He scanned their approach, noting their paths, their focus on the gully where the drone lay mangled. "They'll be looking for signs of sabotage for us." One of the Viridian scouts paused, its helmet-mounted sensors sweeping the very alcove where Slade and Rook hid. A faint hum, almost imperceptible to Slade, reached Rook. She tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for Slade's arm. "Heat signature," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the scout. "They detect residual warmth." Slade's mind raced. Their body heat, even minimal, would be a beacon against the frigid rock. "We move deeper." He gestured to a narrow fissure in the rock face behind them, barely wide enough for one person. "They won't expect us to go into the mountain." Rook moved first, her lithe form sliding into the fissure with practiced ease. Slade followed, his rifle held close, the cold rock pressing against his back. The passage was dark, a winding tunnel that offered both concealment and a path deeper into the mountain's labyrinthine core. "They will follow," Rook stated, her voice echoing softly. "Let them," Slade replied, his grin a thin line in the darkness. "This mountain has more tricks than they know." He led them through a series of twists and turns, familiar to him since childhood. The air grew colder, holding the scent of ancient stone and damp earth. They emerged into a larger cavern, a natural chamber carved by millennia of water and ice. A faint light filtered in from a high opening, casting long, eerie shadows. Slade pointed to a section of the cavern wall, where a natural rockslide had occurred years ago, leaving a precarious overhang. "This is it," Slade said, his plan forming. "They'll come through the fissure expecting to find us in a dead end. We'll be waiting." Rook studied the overhang. "Unstable," she noted, a calculating gleam in her eyes. "Can we control it?" "We can encourage it," Slade corrected. "Just enough to block their path, maybe disable their equipment, not to crush them, just to stop them." He knew the Viridians were intelligent, their lives valuable even to an enemy. His goal was to deter, not to kill. The hum of Viridian tech grew louder, closer. Footsteps echoed faintly through the fissure. The 3 scouts were inside the tunnel. "They're split," Rook observed, 2 in front, 1 behind. Her senses were a living map of their approach. Slade nodded, impressed by her instantaneous assessment. "Perfect. The lead 2 will trigger the first part." He moved to a small, strategically placed boulder, nestled just beneath the unstable overhang. A strong push, timed just right, would bring down a controlled cascade of rock and ice. Rook positioned herself near the fissure's exit, her body coiled, ready. Her eyes fixed on the opening. The first Viridian scout emerged, its helmet scanning the cavern. It paused, its internal comms likely buzzing with information. Just as the second scout began to appear, Slade heaved against the boulder. With a groan, the rock shifted. A shower of smaller stones and ice shards rained down, followed by larger chunks. The two lead scouts reacted instantly, their shields flaring, but the sheer volume of debris, combined with the unexpected angle, caught them off guard. One stumbled, its comms unit sparking as it hit the ground. The other was pinned momentarily by a fallen rock, its leg suit crumpling. The third scout, still in the fissure, halted, its progress blocked by the sudden avalanche. "They're trapped," Rook confirmed, her voice laced with satisfaction. She didn't move to attack, simply observed the chaos. Slade watched, his breathing heavy from the effort. "Damage report," he mumbled, more to himself than Rook. He saw the pinned scout struggling, its shield still active but its mobility compromised. The other was attempting to assist, its weapon now drawn, scanning for the source of the attack. The Viridian command channel flared, a rapid series of alien clicks and tones. The scouts were reporting their situation. "They understand now," Rook stated, turning to Slade, a faint smile gracing her lips. "The mountain is not empty, it fights." Slade met her gaze, a shared understanding passing between them. They had bought themselves time, and more importantly, they had shown their formidable opponents that this was not a simple hunt. This was a war of attrition, fought on their terms in their territory. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers, a silent affirmation of their unbreakable bond. The warmth of her touch was a stark contrast to the cold mountain air, a promise of continued defiance. They would not yield. The next wave of Viridian hunters would find them just as ready. Slade and Rook moved swiftly, not waiting for a direct counterattack. The trapped scouts would report their situation, and the Viridian forces would adapt. They knew the invaders would not retreat easily. "They are sending a retrieval team," Rook whispered, her head cocked, listening to vibrations Slade could not perceive. "More heavily armed, and a new drone, it's scanning the rock face." Slade nodded, already anticipating this. "This way." He led her deeper into a narrow passage, a natural tunnel he had discovered years ago, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. It snaked upwards, offering concealment and a higher vantage point. The rockslide had bought them time, but not safety. The air grew colder as they ascended. Slade kept a hand on Rook's arm, guiding her through particularly tricky sections, his fingers brushing the fine hair on her forearm. She moved with an almost liquid grace, her powerful limbs finding purchase on seemingly smooth surfaces. Their movements were synchronized, a silent dance honed by desperation and an unspoken understanding. They reached a small, concealed ledge overlooking the cavern where the scouts were trapped. Below, a contingent of Viridian soldiers, clad in heavier armor, had descended. They worked efficiently, using energy tools to clear the rockslide, their focus entirely on their trapped comrades. The new drone, smaller and more agile than the first, zipped through the cavern, its sensors bathing the walls in an invisible light. "It's mapping the internal structure," Rook murmured, her gaze tracking the drone. "Looking for new entry points or us." "It won't find this one," Slade replied, patting the rough rock beside him. "Too small, too irregular for their standard scans. We have the advantage here." He watched the Viridians. Their rescue efforts were methodical but slow. The mountain was resisting them. A surge of pride, a fierce protectiveness for his home, swelled within him. This was his territory and he would defend it. Below, the trapped scouts were freed. One limped heavily, its leg suit visibly damaged. The other's comm unit remained dark. The lead Viridian, identifiable by a distinct insignia on its armor, surveyed the cavern, then spoke rapidly into its own comms. Its gaze lingered on the fissure where Slade had triggered the collapse. "They understand," Rook said, her voice low. "They know it was deliberate, not an accident." "Good," Slade grunted. "Let them understand. This isn't a simple hunt, it's a fight." A new wave of Viridian chatter crackled through Rook's enhanced hearing. "They are splitting up," she reported. "One team will continue to clear the main passage. The other is deploying smaller, ground-level drones. They're coming for the fissures." Slade's mind raced. The small drones would be harder to evade, capable of navigating tight spaces. They would need a different approach. We need to move. There's another path further up through a network of ice tunnels. It's treacherous, but it leads to the north face. They won't expect us there. Rook met his gaze, her amber eyes reflecting his resolve. The cold will affect their systems. Their armor is not designed for sustained exposure to this level of sub-zero. Exactly, Slade confirmed. We use their weaknesses against them. My weakness is their tech. Their weakness is my mountain. He gestured for her to follow, leading the way into an even narrower opening, a dark slit in the rock face that promised only more cold and danger. The ice tunnels were a labyrinth of glistening blue and white, their breath plumed in the frigid air. The ground was slick and the walls sparkled with frost. Slade moved cautiously, testing each step, his survival instincts guiding him. Rook, however, seemed to thrive in the cold. Her senses, already heightened, seemed to sharpen further here. She moved silently, a ghost in the ice. As they navigated a particularly tight bend, a faint, high-pitched whine echoed through the ice. "Drone," Rook warned, her hand instantly on Slade's arm, pulling him back against a frozen wall. "Small, very close." Slade pressed himself flat, his heart thudding against his ribs. The sound grew louder, closer. He saw a faint light, bobbing in the distance. The Viridians were using miniature recon drones, designed to scout ahead in confined spaces. These were far more advanced than the previous models. "It's too small for a rockslide," Slade murmured, "and too fast. Can you disable it?" Rook shook her head. "Not without revealing our position. It would register the energy signature, but I can mask us." She reached out, her fingers brushing the icy wall. A strange, almost imperceptible shimmer seemed to ripple around them, a distortion in the frigid air. The tiny drone zipped past their hiding spot, its single optical sensor sweeping the passage. It paused for a fraction of a second, its light flickering as if registering something, then continued its path, disappearing into the icy depths. Slade let out a slow breath. "What did you do?" "A subtle energy distortion," Rook explained. "A trick from Viridian scouts. It mimics environmental interference, makes their sensors read empty space, only effective for brief moments and on small objects." "Clever," Slade acknowledged, a spark of admiration in his eyes. Their combined knowledge, his understanding of the terrain and her alien ingenuity, was proving to be a formidable defense. They were more than just two individuals. They were a unit, a force the Viridians clearly underestimated. They continued their ascent, the drone's whine fading into the distance. Rook's mask would not hold indefinitely, nor would it fool a larger, more sophisticated scanner. They needed to stay ahead always. As they neared the exit to the north face, Rook stopped abruptly. "They are sending a larger force, directly to this sector. They know we are moving towards the north face. They have anticipated our move." Her voice held a hint of frustration, a rare crack in her usual composure. Slade frowned. How could they know unless, he looked at Rook, a sudden realization dawning. "They're tracking you." Rook nodded slowly. A residual energy signature from the shard. Even crushed, fragments might still emit a faint pulse, or perhaps a biological tracker embedded from my past. I have feared this. Her eyes were filled with a profound weariness, a deep-seated fear he had rarely seen. "We'll deal with it," Slade said, his voice firm, reaching out to grasp her hand. Her skin was warm against his, a comforting anchor in the icy gloom. "We always do. What's the plan, then? If they're waiting for us on the north face, we can't just walk out." Rook squeezed his hand, her gaze meeting his, a renewed determination in her eyes. "We don't walk out. We make them think we walk out. Then we use the mountain again." Slade smiled, a grim, determined curve of his lips. He knew exactly what she meant. They would create a diversion, draw the Viridians to one point while they slipped away or prepared another surprise. The fight was far from over, but with Rook by his side, the impossible suddenly felt achievable. His solitude was gone, replaced by a partnership that transcended worlds, a bond forged in fire and ice, unbreakable. Slade tightened his grip on Rook's hand, the cold seeping through his glove doing little to diminish the warmth he felt for her. They moved with urgency, their steps synchronized, a silent understanding passing between them that needed no words. The north face, a sheer wall of ice and rock, loomed ahead, a natural fortress that now felt like a cage. "They expect us to try the obvious path," Rook said, her voice a low murmur against the wind. "A direct ascent. We must give them that expectation." Slade nodded, already scanning the crags above. "There's a fissure, almost invisible unless you know where to look. It leads to a small, protected ledge. From there we can create a disturbance, a visual flare, something that mimics an escape." "And an energy signature," Rook added, pulling a small, intricate device from a hidden pouch on her belt. It was no larger than his thumb, crafted from the same dark, shimmering alloy as the shard. "A pulse, strong and brief, designed to emulate my own residual trace. It will draw their primary sensors." They reached the fissure, a jagged scar on the mountain's face. Slade led the way, his gloved fingers finding purchase on barely visible handholds. Rook followed effortlessly, her movements fluid and precise, her preternatural strength making the climb seem trivial. They emerged onto a narrow ledge, hidden by an overhang of rock. Below, the valley stretched out, a vast, white canvas. Above, the stars were beginning to prick through the fading twilight. Here, Slade pointed to a crumbling section of rock near the ledge's edge. "I can dislodge this. It will create a small rock slide, just enough to look like someone was scrambling for purchase, then fell or continued." Rook nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant, faint glow of Viridian lights in the passes below. "Perfect. I will synchronize the pulse with the impact. They will believe we attempted a hasty escape through this path." She set the small device on a flat stone, its single indicator light a faint blue. Slade wedged his pry bar into a crack in the rock, testing its stability. "Ready." "Ready," Rook confirmed, her gaze unwavering. With a grunt, Slade applied his weight, leveraging the bar. The rock groaned, then tore free with a grinding roar, tumbling down the precipice, gathering smaller stones in its wake. Simultaneously, Rook pressed a hidden stud on her device. A brilliant, sapphire pulse of light erupted from it, a silent, powerful scream across the electromagnetic spectrum before it winked out. They waited, pressed against the cold rock, listening. For a moment there was only the wind. Then in the distance a faint, high-pitched whine grew louder. A sleek, dark Viridian drone, larger than the last, shot across the sky, its optical sensors sweeping the north face, drawn by the combined signals. It paused directly over where the rockslide had occurred, hovering like a predatory bird. "They took the bait," Slade whispered, a grim satisfaction in his voice. Rook's expression remained serious. For the moment, their primary attention is diverted, but they will send ground teams to confirm. We cannot stay here. As if on cue, a second, smaller object detached from the larger drone. It was a miniature scout, almost invisible against the rock, its movements swift and silent. It wasn't heading for the rockslide. It was heading directly towards their concealed ledge. "They're not completely fooled," Slade said, his jaw tightening. "That's a secondary probe, looking for residual heat or a more precise signature." Rook's amber eyes narrowed. "It is more sophisticated than the others. It seeks biological heat signatures, not just energy traces. They learn quickly." Her hand went to the hilt of her ceremonial knife, a glint of metal in the dim light. "No," Slade said, placing a hand on her arm. "Not here. They'll pinpoint us. We need to disappear again." He scanned their immediate surroundings. "There's an old miner's tunnel, almost completely collapsed, a few hundred feet along this ledge. It's unstable, dangerous, but it might lead deeper into the mountain, away from their sensors." Rook looked at him, her gaze intense. "Unstable tunnels are a risk, but a known risk. We do it." Her trust in him was absolute, a powerful, unspoken affirmation. They moved with renewed stealth, hugging the rock face, their shadows dancing in the fading light. The miniature scout drone was approaching, its tiny thrusters barely audible, its sensors undoubtedly sweeping their path. Slade felt a prickle on the back of his neck, the sensation of being hunted. "It's getting closer," Rook murmured, her voice tight. "It's adapting its scan pattern. It knows we are close." They reached the entrance to the old tunnel. It was little more than a jagged crack in the rock, partially obscured by fallen debris. Slade peered inside. The air was heavy, damp, and smelled of ancient earth and minerals. He pulled out his small headlamp, its beam cutting a weak path into the darkness. "It's a tight squeeze," he warned, "and it looks like it's been untouched for decades. Could be rock falls inside." "We have no other choice," Rook said, her eyes fixed on the approaching drone. It was now a mere 100 feet away, its silent approach unnerving. "Go, I will follow." Slade squeezed through the narrow opening, his pack scraping against the rough rock. He twisted and turned, feeling the claustrophobia begin to press in. He heard Rook enter behind him, her movements surprisingly graceful despite the confined space. Inside, the tunnel was a winding labyrinth of rough-hewn rock. The air grew colder, the darkness absolute beyond his headlamp's beam. He moved carefully, testing each step, his boots crunching on loose scree. "How far do you think this goes?" Rook's voice, surprisingly calm, came from directly behind him. "I remember hearing stories," Slade replied, his breath fogging in the cold. "Some prospectors tried to tunnel through the mountain looking for rare minerals. They abandoned it, said it was too unstable." He paused, listening. The faint whine of the drone was still audible, though distant now, muffled by the rock. "We need to create another obstacle, something to buy us time." Rook's hand found his in the darkness, a comforting pressure. "We will find it together." Slade felt a surge of warmth, cutting through the chill of the tunnel and the anxiety of their situation. Her unwavering faith, her quiet strength, was a beacon in the oppressive darkness. They might be deeper in the mountain, cornered in a different way, but they were still fighting. And with Rook by his side, every step into the unknown felt like a step towards victory, not just survival. Their bond, forged in blizzards and battle, was their ultimate defense. Slade pressed onward, his headlamp beam dancing across the rough-hewn walls. The tunnel twisted, descended, then leveled out. He spotted a section where the supporting timbers looked old, splintered, barely holding. Loose rock fragments littered the floor below it. "Here," Slade murmured, pointing his light. "This could work, if we can bring down these supports." Rook stepped closer, her keen eyes assessing the structure. "It is weak. The drone is fast. We must be quicker." The faint, high-pitched whine of the drone grew louder, echoing in the confined space. It was gaining on them. "We need to destabilize it from a distance," Slade said, his mind racing. He noticed a pile of rusted mining tools shoved into a crevice nearby. A heavy pickaxe lay half-buried. He retrieved it, testing its weight. This will help. He began to carefully strike at the base of one of the main support timbers, aiming for a point where the wood was already cracked. Each blow sent a shower of dust and splinters, the sound amplified by the tunnel walls. The drone's whine was a constant, growing presence. Rook stood guard, her senses tuned to the approaching threat. "It is very close, perhaps 30 feet. Slade gritted his teeth, putting more force into his swings. The timber groaned, a deep, ominous sound. Small rocks began to trickle from the ceiling. "Ready to move fast when it goes," Slade instructed, his voice strained. "I am ready," Rook confirmed, her body tensed. With a final, powerful strike, the timber split with a sickening crack. The entire section of the ceiling above them shuddered. A cascade of rocks, dust, and splintered wood began to fall, creating a chaotic wall directly behind them. "Now," Slade yelled, grabbing Rook's hand. They sprinted forward, deeper into the dark tunnel, just as the main collapse happened. A deafening roar filled the space, followed by a thick cloud of dust that instantly swallowed their light. Slade pulled Rook around a sharp bend, shielding her as the immediate impact faded. He coughed, trying to clear his lungs. His headlamp beam was useless in the swirling particulate. "Are you all right?" he rasped. "Yes," Rook said, her grip firm. Her voice was calm, though he felt her quickened breath. The drone. They waited, listening. The roar had subsided into a continuous rumble of settling debris. There was no more whine, only the sound of their own breathing and the drip of water from the tunnel walls. "It should be buried," Slade ventured, hope rising in his chest. "That was a lot of rock." A faint, flickering light appeared through the dust cloud behind them. It wasn't the steady beam of the scout drone. It was an erratic, pulsing glow, like a damaged energy source struggling to maintain itself. "No," Rook whispered, her eyes wide. "It is not destroyed. It is damaged, but still active." Slade swore under his breath. The Viridian technology was more resilient than he'd anticipated. The miniature drone, though battered, was clearly attempting to free itself, its damaged emitters throwing off distorted light. "It will still track us," Rook stated, her voice tight with concern. "Even damaged, its sensors will function." "Then we keep moving," Slade said, pulling her hand again. His mind was already searching for the next weakness, the next opportunity. This tunnel has to lead somewhere. They navigated the dust-choked passage, the flickering light of the struggling drone a chilling reminder of its persistence. The air grew thinner here, colder still. Slade noticed a faint, almost imperceptible draft. "Airflow," he pointed out. "There might be another exit or a vertical shaft." Rook nodded, her gaze sweeping the high ceiling. "Upwards. That is good. Harder for the drone to follow if it cannot fly freely." They found a narrow, vertical shaft, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through one at a time. It ascended steeply, the rough-hewn handhold slippery with moisture. Slade went first, testing each grip, pulling himself up with practiced ease. Rook followed, her movements silent, her strength evident as she ascended without a sound. The drone's flickering light was still visible below, a stubborn, wounded predator. It was trying to navigate the new rockfall, its damaged form struggling. "It cannot follow us directly up this shaft," Rook observed, her voice barely audible as they climbed. "It is too wide for it to brace, too narrow for full flight." "It will find another way around," Slade countered, knowing the enemy's relentless tactics. "Or wait for us at the top. We need to be ready." They emerged into a small, natural cavern, higher up in the mountain. Moonlight filtered in through a narrow crevice far above, casting ethereal shadows. The air was fresh and bitingly cold. The drone's light was no longer visible below them. "We bought ourselves some time," Slade said, allowing himself a moment of relief. He looked at Rook, her face illuminated by the faint moonlight, her amber eyes reflecting a fierce determination. "What now?" Rook moved to the crevice, peering out into the night. Her expression grew grim. "They will know this shaft exists. The main forces. They will send a team." She turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "We are almost through the mountain. One more push. We will face them outside on our terms, not theirs." Slade nodded, a cold resolve settling in. He knew what she meant. They were not just evading anymore. They were preparing to strike back, to end this pursuit. Their bond was a silent agreement, a shared defiance against impossible odds. Together, they would emerge from the mountain's heart, ready for the final confrontation. Slade moved to the crevice Rook had indicated. It was a narrow opening, a jagged smile in the rock face, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. A biting wind whipped in, carrying the scent of pine and fresh snow. He peered out cautiously. The moon hung high, illuminating a wide, desolate plateau that stretched for 100 yards before dropping into a steep, forested valley. The ground was rocky, interspersed with patches of stubborn, wind-scoured snow. There were no immediate hiding places, but the uneven terrain offered potential cover further out. "This is it," Slade murmured, turning to Rook. "Exposed, but we control the exit." Rook nodded, her eyes scanning the landscape with an intensity that missed nothing. "They will expect us to stay inside the mountain. This open ground is a risk they will not predict. Exactly, Slade agreed. He took a deep breath, the cold air sharp in his lungs. We need to use the plateau's natural dips and rises. Create a funnel, force them to move where we want them. He began to explain his plan, his voice low and urgent. I'll move to that cluster of boulders. He pointed to a formation about 50 yards out and set up a diversion. You need to stay hidden, observe their approach. When I draw their fire, you flank them from the north, using the ridge line. Rook's gaze hardened. No, we stay together, split, and we are vulnerable. Rook, my rifle is long-range, Slade insisted. Their energy weapons are too powerful up close. I can create an opening. You are faster, more agile. You can disable their equipment. Her internal thought. His logic was sound, yet the thought of him exposed, alone, grated against her protective instincts. But he was right. They had to use every advantage. Fine, she conceded, the word clipped. But if you are in danger, I will break cover. Understood, Slade said, a brief warm glance passing between them. He trusted her completely. He knew she would. Now let's move. Slade squeezed through the crevice first, his rifle held close. The cold air hit him, but his focus was absolute. He moved swiftly, low to the ground, using every shadow and rock for cover. Rook followed, a silent phantom in the moonlight, her movements fluid and impossibly quick. She found a concealed position behind a low rise, her eyes fixed on the valley below, waiting. Minutes stretched, tense and silent. Then a faint shimmer appeared at the edge of the valley, just where the forest met the plateau. It was not the damaged drone from before, but a larger, more imposing craft. It hovered silently, then descended, deploying 3 figures onto the snow-dusted ground. They were humanoid, encased in sleek, dark armor, their movements precise and coordinated. Each carried an energy weapon, glowing faintly. The damaged scout drone from the tunnels now emerged from the same crevice Slade and Rook had used, struggling slightly, but operational. It rose into the air, its single functional sensor array sweeping the plateau. It knew their general location. They brought the drone, Rook whispered into the comm link Slade had given her, and 3 ground units, heavily armed. Slade was already in position behind the boulders, his rifle steady. The drone first. It's a spotter. Without it, they're blind. He aimed carefully, leading the drone's erratic flight path. The rifle barked once, a sharp crack in the still night. The projectile struck the drone's main propulsion unit with a metallic clang. It spiraled wildly, emitting a cascade of sparks before crashing into the rocks below, exploding into a shower of debris. The Viridian ground units immediately reacted, their weapons snapping up, scanning the plateau. They were fast, disciplined. They're coming, Rook reported, her voice calm despite the rising tension, spreading out. They are looking for the source of the shot. Good, Slade grunted. Keep their attention. He fired again, a quick succession of shots, deliberately missing the lead unit but kicking up snow and rock fragments close by. The energy blasts from the Viridian weapons tore into the boulders around Slade, sending chips of stone flying. He ducked, reloading quickly. Rook moved, a blur of motion along the northern ridge, using the undulating terrain to remain unseen. She was a silent hunter, closing the distance. The Viridian units were focused on Slade's position, their energy fire concentrating on the boulders. They're too concentrated, Slade informed her, his voice strained. One of them needs to break off. He fired again, aiming for the ground near the far-right Viridian, forcing him to shift position. The Viridian unit, momentarily separated from its companions, became Rook's target. She accelerated, her muscles coiling and releasing with impossible power. She closed the gap in seconds, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, a primal force against advanced technology. The Viridian turned, startled, its weapon beginning to track her, but Rook was faster. She launched herself forward, not aiming to kill but to disable. Her fist connected with the Viridian's arm, twisting the energy weapon from its grasp and sending it skittering across the icy ground. Then, with another swift movement, she jammed her elbow into the joint of its armored leg, hearing a faint crunch. The Viridian warrior stumbled, its movements compromised. The other two Viridians reacted instantly, turning their weapons towards Rook. Energy bolts sizzled past her, impacting the ground where she had stood moments before. "She's exposed," Slade stated, his internal thought a surge of protective alarm. He needed to act. He fired a rapid series of shots, forcing the remaining two Viridians to take cover behind a small rock outcrop. This gave Rook the precious seconds she needed. She spun, retrieving the disabled Viridian's energy weapon. She didn't understand its functions, but it was a weapon. She ripped a critical power conduit from the side of its armor, ensuring it would not recover quickly. The Viridian unit lay on the ground, struggling to move, its armor systems flickering. Rook then aimed the captured energy weapon at the rock outcrop where the other two Viridians were hiding. She fired, a brilliant burst of energy tearing into the stone, making them hesitate. It was a bluff, a distraction, but it worked. "They're regrouping," Rook said, moving back into cover. "That weapon is a liability for me. Too slow." She tossed the alien rifle away, letting it clatter uselessly against the rocks. "Good," Slade replied, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "We've disabled one, damaged their drone. They know we're not easy prey." He paused, scanning the horizon. The remaining two Viridians were now more cautious, communicating with each other through their helmets. They were no longer blindly charging. "They'll send more," Rook said, her eyes fixed on the valley, then sweeping the mountain faces. "They understand our methods now. They will adapt." "Then so will we," Slade responded, his gaze meeting hers across the plateau. The moonlight illuminated his determined face, the rifle held ready. Their alliance was a silent, unyielding force, forged in desperation and shared purpose. They had drawn first blood on the plateau, but the true fight was only just beginning. The remaining two Viridians spread out. One moved right, attempting a wide flank, while the other provided covering fire. Slade ducked behind his boulder, returning fire to keep their heads down. Rook melted into the sparse shadows of the northern ridge, a predatory whisper against the wind. "They are trying to pinch us," Slade communicated, his voice low. "They are learning," Rook confirmed. "Their commander is observing." A high-pitched whine cut through the air. From behind a distant rock formation, a larger, more heavily armored Viridian unit emerged. This one was different. It moved with an authoritative stride, its weapon held with an almost casual confidence. Its helmet was sleek, without the standard targeting array. "That is the lead," Rook stated, her voice tight. "The one who sent the others. They call him Overseer." "And he thinks he can walk right in," Slade muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. This was not just a pursuit, it was an execution. The Overseer raised an arm. The two flanking Viridians paused, then shifted their positions, converging towards the center of the plateau, forming a triangular assault. They were forcing Slade and Rook into an open kill zone. "We need to break their formation," Slade decided. "Rook, can you get behind the Overseer, create a distraction, draw his fire? I will take out the nearest flank." "Understood," Rook replied. Her form shimmered, a brief, almost imperceptible shift in the light as she moved with impossible speed. She was a blur, using the limited cover of ancient, wind-scoured rocks. The Overseer tracked her movement with unnerving precision, his head turning slowly, deliberately. He did not fire, but his presence alone seemed to radiate a cold, calculating threat. Slade fired 3 quick shots at the Viridian to his right, forcing it to dive behind a narrow rock spire. Before it could recover, he shifted his aim, targeting the other flanking unit. His shots impacted its armor, making it stagger. The Overseer finally moved, not to attack Rook, but to intercept her. He drew a glowing blade from his hip, a weapon unlike the energy rifles of the other units. Its edge pulsed with an internal light. "He is going for you, Rook," Slade yelled, his heart pounding. Rook saw the blade. She feigned a direct attack, then spun, changing direction mid-stride. The Overseer was fast, his movements fluid, but Rook was faster. She darted past him, momentarily disorienting him. The Overseer recovered, turning with astonishing agility. He did not waste time. He sent a low-energy pulse from his blade towards Rook, not meant to kill but to stun. It struck her leg, making her stumble. Rook, Slade fired a burst at the Overseer, but the armored figure barely flinched. The rounds ricocheted off his reinforced plating. Rook quickly regained her footing, the stun pulse fading. He is more durable, she gritted out. The blade has a secondary function. We need to regroup, Slade said, realizing their plan was unraveling. Fall back to the chasm. He laid down suppressing fire, forcing the two remaining regular Viridians to hunker down. Rook, still favoring her leg slightly, moved with renewed urgency towards a deep, narrow chasm that split the plateau. It was a perilous, jagged cut in the earth, a place of shadows and unstable ledges. The Overseer followed, his strides long and measured. He was not rushing, he was herding them. He wants us in the chasm, Rook observed, her eyes scanning the rock faces. He knows the terrain. Maybe, Slade replied, or maybe he does not know what we will do once we are in there. They reached the edge of the chasm, a sheer drop into darkness. Wind whistled up from its depths. Slade glanced at Rook, a shared understanding passing between them. This was their last stand on this plateau. We will separate them, Slade explained, pointing to a narrow ledge that ran along one side of the chasm. I will go low, you go high. We will use the echoes, confuse their sensors. Do not engage the Overseer unless you have to. He is the biggest threat, Rook countered, her gaze fixed on the approaching Overseer. Precisely, Slade said, which means we do not give him a clean shot at both of us. The two regular Viridians reached the chasm's edge, their weapons raised. The Overseer stood behind them, observing. Viridian unit, halt pursuit. Surrender the asset, Slade of Earth. The Overseer's voice boomed across the plateau, perfectly modulated, echoing slightly in the chasm. It was the first time they had heard a Viridian speak their language. Slade felt a cold dread. They knew his name, they knew who he was. Rook's eyes narrowed. He has been observing you, not just me. You want her, Slade shouted back, his voice defiant. Come get her. He dove into the chasm, scrambling down a precarious rock face, using every handhold and crevice he knew. The Viridians hesitated, then one of them fired into the darkness after him. Rook waited a beat longer, then ascended. She scaled the opposite side of the chasm with impossible grace, finding purchase on seemingly smooth rock, disappearing into the jagged shadows near the top. The Overseer stepped forward, a foolish display of defiance. You cannot protect her. Her purpose is greater than your sentimentality. He aimed his glowing blade at the chasm entrance, not at the depths, but at the rock face itself. A concentrated beam of energy erupted, striking the rock. The stone hissed and cracked, a small section beginning to crumble. He is trying to collapse the entrance, Rook warned from above. To trap you, Slade. Slade heard the grinding of rock, the shower of debris. He was deeper now, out of the direct line of fire, but the chasm was unstable. He glanced up, seeing the Overseer's relentless assault on the rock. Keep him busy, Rook, Slade yelled, his voice echoing. Find a weakness. Rook moved, a shadow among shadows. She was higher now, above the Overseer, but exposed. She launched herself across a gap, landing on a narrow ledge directly above the Viridian commander. She plunged downwards, her claws extended, aiming for the Overseer's head. The Overseer reacted with blinding speed, turning and raising his blade. Rook's attack was deflected, her claws scraping against the glowing energy of the blade. The impact sent a jarring shockwave up her arm. She landed heavily on the ledge next to him, momentarily stunned. One of the regular Viridians moved to engage Rook, but Slade, from below, fired a precise shot. The round impacted the Viridian's knee, making it buckle. The Overseer pressed his advantage against Rook, his blade sweeping in a wide arc. Rook dodged, using the narrowness of the ledge to her favor, but she was cornered. His movements were too precise, too practiced. She needs help, Slade thought, desperate. He began to climb, ignoring the unstable rock, ignoring the Viridian with the injured knee who was now trying to aim its weapon at him. The Overseer spoke again, his voice cold. "You prolong the inevitable, Guardian. Your defiance only brings more suffering." Never, Rook snarled, her eyes blazing with amber light. She was not just fighting for survival. She was fighting for Slade, for the life they had found together. She saw an opening. The Overseer's blade was a potent weapon, but it was also a focal point. With a sudden burst of speed, she darted past the blade, aiming for the Overseer's arm, the one holding the weapon. Her claws raked across the armored joint. It was not enough to disable him, but it made him flinch. There, Slade yelled, seeing the momentary distraction. He found a purchase, pulled himself onto the ledge, and raised his rifle. The Viridian with the injured knee was still aiming, but Slade was faster. He fired, hitting its weapon, sending sparks flying. The Overseer, focused on Rook, was momentarily off balance. Slade saw a faint, almost imperceptible seam in his armor near the shoulder, a design flaw or a deliberate weakness. He did not care. He aimed and fired. The round impacted the seam with a sharp clang. A shower of sparks erupted, and the Overseer recoiled, a low sound of surprise escaping its helmet. Its glowing blade flickered, then dimmed. "You are resourceful, human," the Overseer's voice changed, a hint of something metallic now, less controlled. "But this is not over." The Overseer raised his damaged blade, focusing its remaining energy on the ground at his feet. A surge of power ripped through the rock. The entire ledge began to vibrate violently. "He is destabilizing the chasm," Rook cried, her eyes wide. "Jump," Slade yelled, grabbing Rook's arm. They launched themselves across the chasm, aiming for the opposite side, where the rock seemed more stable. The Viridians below scrambled, trying to find footing as the ground fractured. The Overseer remained on the collapsing ledge, watching them, his damaged blade still pulsing. Slade and Rook landed hard on the far side, scrambling up as rocks rained down around them. The chasm groaned, a deep, resonant sound. The ledge where the Overseer stood gave way. He fell not into the deepest part, but onto a lower, unstable outcrop, his form momentarily obscured by dust and debris. The two regular Viridians were now caught in the collapsing chasm, struggling to climb. "They are trapped," Rook exclaimed, seeing their plight. "For now," Slade replied, catching his breath. He looked down into the swirling dust, but the Overseer was gone from view. "He will be back. He does not give up easily." He turned to Rook, her amber eyes reflecting the desperate fight. Their hands were still clasped, a lifeline in the chaos. The chasm behind them was a testament to their desperate, brutal dance with their pursuers. They had survived, but the lead agent remained. The final confrontation was yet to come. They were still together, still fighting, their bond the only unbroken thing in a shattered landscape. Slade scanned the opposite side of the chasm, the rock face unstable and crumbling. He knew the Overseer would not be far. A low growl rumbled in Rook's chest, her senses extended, searching. "He is climbing," she whispered, pointing to a shadowed cleft higher up. "Fast." A moment later, the Overseer's armored form emerged, clambering onto a narrow ledge above them. His movements were swift despite his damaged blade and the earlier fall. He looked down, his helmet's visor glowing with renewed intensity. "You prolong the inevitable," the Overseer's voice echoed, cold and clear. "The information you carry belongs to Viridia." "It belongs to no one who would exploit it," Rook retorted, her stance defiant. Her fur rippled subtly at her shoulders, a hint of her other form. Slade pulled his rifle, aiming. We are not giving you anything." The overseer ignored Slade, focusing his gaze entirely on Rook. "You betray your purpose, Guardian. Your people require what you possess." "My purpose is here," Rook declared, stepping forward, shielding Slade instinctively. With him. A faint shimmer of energy emanated from the overseer's blade. He did not charge, but instead began to target the precarious ground around them. Small energy pulses struck the rock, chipping away at the edge of their platform. "He is trying to isolate us," Slade realized, pulling Rook back. "We need to move." They retreated along the plateau edge, the overseer methodically cutting off their escape routes with precise energy blasts. The air grew thick with dust and the smell of scorched rock. Slade knew they were being funneled toward a dead end, a sheer drop into another, deeper canyon. "This way," Rook suddenly urged, pulling Slade toward a narrow, almost invisible crack in the rock face. A path, old. Slade trusted her implicitly. They squeezed through the fissure, emerging into a small, concealed hollow. It offered no real escape, only temporary cover. The overseer appeared at the fissure's mouth, his helmet tilting as he scanned their position. A futile gesture, he stated, stepping into the hollow. He raised his blade, its energy now fully restored, the previous damage seemingly bypassed by internal repair systems. "This ends now." Slade raised his rifle, but the overseer was too quick. He launched forward, a blur of motion, directly at Rook. Slade fired, but the overseer deflected the shot with a casual flick of his blade, the energy round sparking harmlessly against the shimmering field. Rook met the charge head-on, her movements a primal dance of power and grace. Her bare hands deflected the stunning blade, her strength surprising even the overseer. But the blade's energy pulsed, and each block sent jolts of pain through her. "He is too strong," Rook grunted, pushing back against a furious parry. "His armor is too dense." Slade saw it then. The overseer's previous injury had been a weakness in the armor's energy conduits, not the physical shell itself. He needed to hit that exact spot again, but the overseer was covering it. Rook drew his attention to his left shoulder. Low. Slade yelled, spotting a momentary flicker in the overseer's defense as he focused on an aggressive overhead strike. Understanding dawned in Rook's amber eyes. With a sudden burst of power, she twisted, slamming her shoulder into the overseer's chest, throwing him off balance. As he stumbled, his left arm momentarily dropped, exposing the damaged conduit seam. Slade did not hesitate. He fired a rapid burst, aiming for the precise point. 3 rounds struck the seam. The overseer froze, a high-pitched whine emanating from his armor. The blade's glow vanished entirely. His movements became jerky, then ceased. He stood rigid for a moment before collapsing to the ground with a heavy thud, his armor smoking faintly. Silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing. Rook stood over the unmoving form, her chest heaving. She nudged the overseer with her foot. No response. "He is done," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The pursuit ends." Slade walked to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace. The warmth of her body against his was a potent anchor in the stark, cold landscape. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "We did it." Rook pulled back slightly, her gaze sweeping across the plateau, then down into the chasm where the other Viridians were still trapped. "They will be rescued, eventually," she stated, her expression unreadable. "But without the overseer's command, they will not pursue. My people will send no more hunters. This planet is now safe." She reached for a small, almost invisible device embedded in her wrist. It was Viridian tech, a residual beacon, a faint link to her past. With a resolute expression, she pressed a hidden catch. The device shimmered, then disintegrated into fine dust that scattered on the wind. "No more ties," she said, looking at Slade. "My home is here with you." Slade's heart swelled, a warmth spreading through him that eclipsed any fire he had ever built. He had been a man of solitude, a master of the wild, but Rook had shown him a different kind of strength, a bond that transcended worlds. "Our home," he corrected gently, drawing her close again. "Always." They stood for a long moment, watching the sun begin its slow descent, painting the distant peaks in hues of gold and crimson. The harsh, unforgiving landscape now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to their resilience and the impossible alliance they had forged. The wind, once a symbol of isolation, now felt like a soft whisper of shared promises. They returned to the mountain ridge, not to hide, but to build. Slade's lintel was replaced by a sturdy cabin, reinforced with his wilderness knowledge and Rook's surprising engineering insights from her world. They harvested timber, cleared land, and established a life rooted in the silent understanding that had blossomed between them. Rook's keen senses became an invaluable asset, not for defense, but for living in harmony with the wild, finding resources Slade had never known existed. She learned his language, her voice gaining inflections of laughter and contentment, while he learned to read the subtle shifts in her amber eyes, the unspoken stories of a guardian who had found her true purpose. One evening, as the first stars appeared over the distant mountains, they sat on the porch of their new cabin. A small fire crackled in the hearth inside, casting a warm glow. Slade held Rook's hand, tracing the lines of her palm. The moon, full and bright, illuminated the vast, quiet landscape. "It is beautiful here," Rook said softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "More beautiful than Veridia." Slade smiled, a genuine, deep smile that reached his eyes. He remembered the desperate, half-frozen creature he had pulled from the blizzard, the wary, wild guardian. Now she was his partner, his love, the impossible truth that had shattered his solitude and rebuilt his world, stronger and infinitely richer. "It is home," he replied, squeezing her hand, "our home." And in the quiet embrace of the mountains, under the vast, indifferent stars, they found a peace that resonated with the beating heart of two souls, forever intertwined. Their journey had ended, and their life together had finally begun.